about this opportunity to tell some of my history because it's quite interesting what me and my family primarily went through before we got here and got this interesting and pretty good life. You can see in the background, but we have a nice house. We live in Irvine, Southern California, so who can ask for more? But that's not the way things always have been. If I'll go back a few years back in the history, I would like to start with my father that was born back in Lithuania back in 1927, a long time ago, and he grew up in Lithuania, as I mentioned earlier. And as a child, he did things that all children do. But then we reached this dark chapter in Jewish history with the Holocaust. And some of the stories I remember, that he was a child of 14 and the Germans were nearing the town and his entire family decided they need to move east, and they packed their belongings and everybody grabbed a suitcase and started walking east towards the Russians, trying to escape from the Germans. They walked for about a day and they reached a bridge that people were kind of trying to cross the bridge altogether. You know, we've got thousands of people crossing the bridge. It's difficult to cross it. And there was a horse and a carriage passing by them. And my grandmother stopped the horseman and said, "I mean, do you have room for us to take us so we can move all together east?" And the horseman said that, "I've got room for one. So you guys figure out who I can take, but I'll take one." And my grandma decided that she's going to take, put her daughter, which is my father's sister, which was, I believe, 2 years older than him, and she was 16, and they put her on the horse carriage, and they went further east. And my father, with his parents, have decided that they cannot outrun the Russians, the Germans, I mean, and they might as well go back to the city that we came from. To make a long story short, my father went through the Holocaust, the ghettos, spent 2 years in the ghetto. Then the Nazis kind of moved him to an extermination camp. Actually, it's a labor camp, Dachau. He got his tattoo on the arm. My grandmother went in a women's camp. My grandfather went with my father to a men's camp. Interesting enough that in the Holocaust Museum, I went to track down some information there, and the Germans kept meticulous records. I can tell what day they were put on transport from Lithuania to Germany, what day they arrived into Germany. Everything is registered, everything is written down. Records are just phenomenal records the Germans had there. Through the labor camp, luckily all three of them have survived, and they had no idea what was happening to my father's sister. She went east, and that was the last time they've seen her, so they've never heard of her. And then the Americans came and liberated the camps. I think the first thing that my dad did, he approached a German soldier and took his hand watch. I mean, he needed to take something, okay? I mean, he was dressed in those pajamas and everything, I mean, malnourished and everything, but somehow we ended up with a German watch, and I have this watch today, and in fact I gave it to Shai on his 30th birthday, okay? I took it to a watchmaker, and he replaced the glass and cleaned it up, and the thing is ticking, okay? It was a standard issue from the German army that apparently their officers were getting the watches, and I've got that watch. Shai has the watch at this point. So the liberation happened. Everybody was kind of happy, reunited. And then I went through the Red Cross records, and the Red Cross shows that the entire family kind of got together in Germany, and they decided they're going to go back to the city in Lithuania. They got to a city in Kaunas, Lithuania.
About when?
Back 1945. So there was, the Germans invaded in 1941. 4 years later, they all come back and they got together in 1945.
Did your dad live in the labor camps for
Yes.
2
years.
2 years.
2 years in the ghetto, 1941 to 1943. In the ghetto, when the ghetto was liquidated, basically either if you couldn't walk, they killed you. If you could walk, put you on a train and shipped you to Germany in a labor camp. 1945, when the Germans were run out by the Red Army, everybody came back.
So he was a teenager.
He 18 years old, he came back, okay? As it happens, my aunt, or his sister, when she left about in 1941 on that horse carriage, she ended up somewhere in deep Russia, in Siberia. And in an orphanage, she lived, as I said, in an orphanage, went to school, and she went to school and became a nurse. She joined the Russian army that came to liberate Lithuania. In 1945, she shows up dressed in military uniform for a family reunion. Okay, so the whole family in 1945 got together. Okay, I think, let me stop here with my father. Back to our stories here. The story of my mother. Okay, my mother had 4 siblings, and she was born in a small village in Lithuania called Tytuvėnai, from all places. And when she was 3-4 years old, her parents moved to the capital of Kaunas. Typical Jewish family. My grandfather was working for a very rich Jewish family as a driver. And as a driver, my mother to this day remembers the car he was driving. It was a Packard. Okay, so in fact, when he was going to work, he would take her and her sisters and brothers on the Packard to school. So everybody thought that she was a rich person, that she comes in the Packard to school. That they have 2 pennies to rub together, okay? But let's go through the Holocaust in her case, because in 1941, her and her sister and her older brother, which was younger than them, were sent to a children's camp for summer in a city called Palanga, which was right on the border of Lithuania and Poland. June 22nd, 1941, the Germans have invaded Lithuania. And the first thing they overran was the camp. Okay? So within 2 hours of the war, it started at 4 o'clock in the morning. At 6 o'clock in the morning, my mother, she was 13 years old, with a sister, which was 12 years old, with their brother, which was believed like 10 years old, they're finding themselves parentless, cut off of their parents, surrounded by the Nazis. Okay. It took the Germans a few days to get to this capital city where the parents were, but the parents, when the Germans started walking in, the parents just moved east. They ran away. So my grandfather, my grandmother, and the youngest son, packed up whatever they could pack, hopped on a train, and just went east to Siberia and spent the entire war back there. My grandfather joined the Russian army as a truck driver, and he was a part of the Jewish brigade that was supporting the Russian army, and then doing whatever they were supposed to be doing there. So my mother ends up the 13-year-old girl responsible for her 2 siblings, and all the Jews were rounded up. I mean, you can look it up in history books, and they were moved into the Kaunas ghetto, again, where my father was. They didn't know each other, they never met each other, but I mean, they were in the same place. And in fact, there are some pictures I have at some point to show you that there was an underground school in the ghetto, that the adults were teaching the children, basic subjects. And my mother has a picture back from 1941. what happened there is that, as I mentioned in my father's story, that at some point the Germans decided they're going to liquidate the ghetto. So if you were a child or you couldn't work, basically they eliminated you. If you were somebody who could work, put you on a train. My mother decided this is a time for her to escape to the woods, okay? And she escaped, and she was in the woods, and she found shelter at a priest's house, okay? And she spent the entire winter there at the priest's house hiding until the priest's daughter found out about it and came and threatened her parents that she's going to go and tell them that there's a Jew living in their house and they better get rid of her. So my mother decided that she's going to run out and try to fight something else. And it was middle of the winter. It was second winter already. She ran out and she spent several days, several nights in the snow, hiding from the Germans there. That somehow they did find out she was there and they were looking for her. I mean, somehow I know it. She has a phobia of dogs to this day, okay? And I think it has to do with the fact that some dogs were chasing her there, but I don't know the details. She ended up being with the partisans, which basically were the civilian fighters that were fighting the Germans. And she ended up joining them and operating there in a support role, fighting the Germans. Her sister, I'm not sure where the sister was. I mean, her sister is alive and well to this day, which is, in 2016. But her brother was put on a train, but not to a labor camp, but rather an extermination camp, and he was never seen again. Okay. Fast forward to 1945. My mother comes out of the woods. Her sister comes back for where she was. And their mother and the brother show up back from the exile in Siberia, back to Lithuania. And the father was fighting with the Russian army, again to liberate the city they were in. He happened to get wounded fighting, liberating the city. And my mother nursed him to health for about a month, and then he just succumbed to the wounds and died. Okay, so he was able to liberate the city, but then he died. And so this is the end of the Holocaust story. That the whole family, both families got together, reunited back in Lithuania, and then the next chapter begins. After the Holocaust, I was growing up as a child. My parents were very practical. You have to be very practical and pragmatic as far as being able to feed the family. Okay. My father was well educated, but my mother was the pusher in the family. I mean, she pushed for things to happen. She would not take no for an answer. Okay. And I think that was one of the reasons that she survived the Holocaust the way she did, because she would not take no for an answer. If there was a barrier, she would go around it or under it or through it, but she will not stop because somebody told her that you cannot do it. And I remember the child, growing up, she was a very tough negotiator. We would go to a store, for example, or to a market, and she would beat the guys down and get something. I would be ashamed, okay? I would say, I'm leaving. No, you stay here, because if you're leaving, it means that we're giving up. And no, you stay here, and we're going to negotiate. I was ashamed. I was really ashamed the way she was beating the guy up. I'll never forget, we went to buy some shirts one time. And I have no idea what the amount she was negotiating for, but it was really piddly, something small. And she stuck to her guns, and she got it, okay? Because the guy just wanted to get rid of her, okay? Just, yeah, fine, whatever you want, just take it and leave me, okay? I don't want to deal with you anymore. She was very, very stubborn, and she always got her way. Always got her way. Now, the primary objective was survival. It's not like she was like Donald Trump trying to build an empire. Okay, it was all about survival. My father, on the other end, he was the guy he was the intellect in the family. He was the guy who was always reading books and physics, and we had a huge library at home. I mean, a lot of books. And I fell in love with reading through him primarily because we used to sit down and read together, okay? Same books. You know, I was 8 years old, he was 30 years old. We would read the same books, like Jules Verne, for example. But he was reading it to me first, you know, I was probably 5 years old, he was reading the books to me.